Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces. The Headspaces are a series of thoughts and musings I have during the course of the week, and I chew all over them and I share them with you. And this week's Headspace, or this is another one of my Headspaces this week's Headspace is called, Is the World Ready for a Black African Pope? And what use are popes these days anyway? So before I jump into this week's Headspace, I'd like to thank all the people who have been listening to my show and coming to my show as listeners for the last 3 years. But in addition to that loyal listenership, I'd like to thank all my new subscribers on my YouTube channel. Yes, darlings, I have 1,093 people who come and subscribe, and I'd like that to get to 1,100, and then after that 1,500, because we're aiming for the stars, darling. Why not? My YouTube channel is called DeniseHeadley.com, which is also the same name as my website, which is called DeniseHeadley.com, where you can make a donation for this rather unique and splendid content, if I say so myself. And you can buy me wings and chips and a Miranda, which I'm very partial to, or you may wish to sponsor rice peas, chicken callaloo, fried chicken scabeach, potentially a bit of tilapia, maybe some yam chips, crisps, I don't know, a bit of Bami Festival. I can't think of anything else on the Caribbean menu, but you might wish to sponsor that also, and that will be most appreciated. Excuse me. My show is live every Friday, and it's a Friday night political talk show, and it's live, and you can hear this content straight away if you join, or you can always catch it on the replay. So with no further ado, let me jump straight back into my question this evening. And said question is the world ready for a black African pope? And how useful are popes these days anyway? Let's address the first question first. Never in the history of papacy, as far as I'm aware in recorded history, given the history of the Catholic Church, they were very much involved in slavery, colonialism. They were funding it, supporting it, eating from it, all of the usual things. They are part of the establishment, as well as their involvement in banking and finance. Notwithstanding that historical context, in the history of that institution, I don't think there's ever been a pope of African descent. And given that the largest growing community of Catholics is in Africa, isn't it time that we had a pope who was black or of African descent? And this is a question that not just myself is pondering over, but other people are pondering over. And I just want you to share this news clipping with you, because there is a particular individual in DRC Congo and one also in Ghana who are significant contenders for the papacy. I think that's the correct word, papacy. The job of being El Popio, the pontiff.
On to our final story for today. History could be in the making in the Vatican as speculation grows over who might be the next leader of the Catholic Church. Across Africa, prayers are currently being offered for Pope Francis. The pontiff passed away yesterday at the age of 88. He was battling health complications and recently suffered bouts of pneumonia. It was confirmed that he died from a stroke and irreversible cardiocirculatory arrest. As the world mourns, Africa finds itself both grieving and watching with anticipation. There is a possibility that the world might get the first black African pope after centuries. Africa is home to nearly 272 million Catholics. It accounts for nearly a fifth of the global Catholic population. And yet, for centuries, the Church's leadership has been dominated by Europe. In his decades of papacy, the Pope Francis began to change that shift, lifting African voices. He appointed more African cardinals and often reminded the Vatican of its responsibility to the global South. Now, in his passing, the depth of mourning in Africa is immense. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu described him as a quote-unquote tireless champion of the poor. South Africa's President Ramaphosa said his worldview on inclusion, and other African leaders echoed a similar sentiment. It's in that spirit that the name of Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana has emerged as a serious contender to succeed Pope Francis. If chosen, he would become the first black pope in modern times, and also only the second African in church history. Turkson rose in the Vatican circles over the years. He has spoken out on poverty, climate change, and inequality. He is a staunch defender of traditional church teachings, and at the same time has shown openness to evolving conversations. Turkson has challenged Africa's harsh LGBTQ+ laws, and when Pope Francis sought a heavy hand in conflict-ridden South Sudan, it was Turkson who was sent. He was seen both as a spiritual man and a diplomat. Other names who are in contention are Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Basungu. The 65-year-old is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He leads 7 million Catholics in local church and is a revered voice among people in the African nation. For Africa, a black pope would mean a lot of things. It would mean diversity, representation, and recognition.
Yes, that was a bit of a long news broadcast, but I think the important questions that it actually raised and the information it was sharing is that for the first time in the papacy history, there is a strong contender for a black pope. And my question is, do you think that's very likely? Do you think it's likely that there will ever be a black pope? Given that what the newscaster just said, that the largest community of growing Catholics is in the global north, but it's also in places like DRC, Congo, and also in Ghana. So what's your thoughts? Before you share your thoughts with me, I just wanted to drop a few thoughts about the previous Pope. Obviously, he's passed away, and we hope that he had an easy passage out of this physical realm. But I asked at the beginning of the Headspace, what use are popes these days anyway? And let's assess that on the previous Pope. What do you remember the Pope doing or saying? Ever, I'm asking. It's not the type of thing you see covered on the news regularly anyway. And we live in the UK, which is an exceptionally secular society. When have you ever seen the Pope being talked about on the news? You know, when I was growing up, the other Pope used to go around in a Pope mobile, and people used to have, pictures, and I think there was a much stronger Catholic practicing community than there is now. But my point is, what positions did Pope Francis occupy that made him memorable or current to any issue that you had going on in the last 10 years? And because I asked that question, I looked at what his position was on Gaza. And he spoke out about the October 7th attack. But prior to that, he'd spoken out in 2013. So he had raised the question around Israel's occupation, but it wasn't one of condemnation. It was rather bland platitudes. And when I looked through what the reported commentary that the Pope had given on things like Haiti and Congo, he condemned the violence. But it was just mainly condemnations of violence. There wasn't any action. And the type of action that you would think someone who is leading a congregation of, 53 million Catholics worldwide, I think there's probably more of them. Let me just check that figure. Alexa, how many Catholics are there worldwide?
Here's something I found on scripturecatholic.com. There are an estimated 1.2 billion Catholics in the world, according to Vatican figures.
So given that the potential church community, the body of Christ, basically, which is the church community, is over 1 billion, do you think that he could have had a bit more sway over things going on in the world, especially around Gaza, in Haiti, in DRC? Or do you think that would get in the way of tithe, the money that comes in from those said parishioners every week? Because let's not forget, the church is a money-making scheme. somebody needs to pay for the lights. So that's my thing. What is the use of a pope these days? And I know I'm saying it from the position of not being a practicing Catholic, but given the state of the world and the fact that we've had several popes, what have been their impact on some of the significant factors and world issues? And I'm sorry to say, I think it's minimal, in my opinion. I think there might be other religious leaders who are more impactful in other parts of the world. But for the Christian community, the Catholic community, I don't think that the Pope is a particularly influential figure. Yes, he says things, he offers platitudes, but what does he actually do to impact on the experience of the people who are poor? You know, the church in itself, the Vatican, is a city in its own right. It has its own bank. You know, it's firmly ensconced into the capitalist system and henceforth doesn't rock the boat. What role did the Vatican and the church and the Catholic Church play in slavery? Funding, supporting, you know, using doctrine to essentially, what's the word I'm looking, sanitize human trafficking, rape, murder and pillage. So, you know, the history of the church, be the Catholic, Christian, it's all donned in the worst elements of human degradation. So what functional use does a pope serve in the 21st century? Aside from leading many people who feel that many people who follow organized religions are somewhat, in a way, I don't want to use the term NPC, which is meaning basically you're just a bystander because you're always looking for something outside of yourself to give you that, that place. You need to go somewhere else to get the best life. That's what most of the organized religions teach. And a lot of people see that now and they're disregarding it. That's why it's so secular. That's what my question's about. How useful is a pope these days? And in addition to that, let's say we do have a pope who is African. What impact is that going to make on those communities in terms of real structural change in those countries? What's been those individuals who are vying for the jobs, impact in those areas, especially in places like DRC, where we've had ongoing violence for however long? Similar to Haiti. I mean, they just murdered the president however long ago. And now, basically the Clintons have taken over that country. If you know anything about Haiti, and just do some reading if that sounds totally like an anathema to you. But the point I'm making is that, what use do these religious figures serve, especially in the Christian religion? I can see their use in the Muslim community because to me, those communities have a different approach to their religion. It's very much more that it's impactful in a way. It governs their lives in a much more daily way than, in my opinion, the Christian faith governs people's lives and the Catholic faith. And so what if we get a black pope? We might even get one, but the likelihood is I doubt they're going to put a black pope in place. It was the last pope who was actually creating a program of inclusion. So, what I'm saying? That the one who just passed, he was letting them through the door. They're not going to pick one yet. You're going to have to wait for at least 6 popes before you get a black melanated one. So what difference will it make is my point. So that's my 2 pence. Yeah, I'm not trying to rain on people's religion. And I know this is a bit of a long headspace, but I'm not trying to rain on people's religions. But I'm asking a genuine question. What is the use of a pope these days? And do you think you're going to get a black one? I hope you like this headspace. And you enjoyed my musings on it. Jump up into the podium, give your thoughts, your feedback, and make a donation also at deniseheadley.com. And also, can you also subscribe to my YouTube channel? And that's it. God, my God, 1407. And cut! See you next week.